The seagull's timely announcement is hardly necessary. As soon as the Costa Concordia comes into view, the passengers take their positions at the railings to catch a first glimpse of the marooned cruise liner. Unbelievable, says this tourist. Such a massive thing off this small island. This man says seeing the ship lying on its side in front of him is distressing, and the fact that 30 people died on it, horrifying. I myself am torn between fascination and dread. It's quite a sight, this shipwreck off the island of Giglio, but few tourists will admit that they're here just to see this spectacle. This man says he didn't only come to look at the ship. The island is wonderful, he says, and he intends to pray for those who died. This woman says she's come to Giglio to have fun with a friend. Finally, we arrive on the small island made famous by the events of January 13th. It's been almost 6 months since the cruise liner's captain steered his ship too close to the coast. The vessel hit rocks and almost capsized. 30 people died. It still lies on its side in front of the harbor. I set off on foot to explore the town. Porto Giglio is a picturesque place, with pretty balconies, quiet little streets, and old houses. But every time I glimpse the sea, the half-submerged liner comes into view. There's no avoiding it. I wonder what effect that's having on the lives of the island's residents. We lived through it, says this woman, and now we're hoping the ship will be removed soon. When you see it, she says, it's horrible knowing there are still 2 bodies in there. From the moment of the disaster, life changed, says this woman. The island was empty at the time, and suddenly it was full of people, she says, rescue workers. That's really changed the island. And it's been like high season ever since. Every half hour, more tourists arrive. It's great for shopkeepers, but it's starting to annoy many locals. Samantha Brizzi from the island's tourist office says the visitors can be divided into 2 groups. She tells me most tourists arrive in the morning and leave again in the afternoon. The majority just come here, take photos and leave, she says, but others do stay on the island for several nights. She says the disaster wasn't that long ago, and it still arouses a great deal of curiosity. It seems a lot of people do decide to stay overnight. In fact, I have difficulty finding a room. On the lookout for day trippers, I come across a group of Italians from the mainland. They're happy to share their opinions about the Costa Concordia's captain, although it's all just speculation. This man says he thinks the captain was drunk when the disaster occurred. He calls him a womanizer. This woman says if he hadn't brought his vessel so close, nothing would have happened. He probably wanted to come here for a meal, says the man. The woman says he was in his cabin with his lover and didn't care about anything else. But when it got dangerous, he took off, she says. Swimming this close to the wreckage is not forbidden, so I go for a dip in the sea. You can immediately tell how rocky the coast is. Even as a swimmer, you have to be careful to avoid injury. Not many people come swimming here. The sight of the wreck puts most of them off. Unfortunately, it's right before your eyes, says this man. It's a pity, because the sea is wonderful. But when you look out, he says, it's disturbing, upsetting. Commander Gianni Dessi of the Coast Guard has invited me to join him and his divers on one of their daily patrols around the ship. As we get closer to the vessel, I can see just how huge it is. Approaching the Costa Concordia is an emotional undertaking. It brings back memories of that disastrous night. One of the divers' tasks is to monitor the ship's movements. Since the disaster, the Costa Concordia has sunk a further 4 meters at the bow and 2 meters at the stern. Time is running out. In August, the wreck will be stabilized to prevent it from sinking deeper. If that happened, it would be impossible to salvage. Toxins would leak into the sea over decades, likely causing an environmental disaster. Once it's been stabilized, the vessel will be hoisted upright with the help of cranes. Then it will be fitted with huge air-filled tanks to refloat it so it can be towed away. The wreck is almost 300 meters long and weighs over 114,000 tons. The salvage operation is being carried out by the U.S. firm Titan Salvage. It's a fitting name for a company charged with such a task. In Greek mythology, the Titans were deities with enormous strength. An Italian company, Micoperi, is building the underwater platforms needed for the operation. In the harbor, I see men dressed in gray or orange, but they've been told not to speak to me. I suspect they're trying to prevent information that could be used in court from being aired on television. I meet Sergio Ortelli, the island's mayor. I ask him about the risks involved in the salvage operation. His answer is cautious and vague. It's obviously a complicated undertaking, he tells me. He says that nothing like it has been attempted in marine history, and that every day is filled with apprehension. But so far, he says, everything has gone well. For a change of scene, I leave Giglio and its macabre attraction for a few hours. In the coastal village of Talamone, I meet Paolo Fanciulli, a fisherman. I join him on a trip off the coast of Maremma. Fanciulli has received a lot of attention for his promotion of sustainable fishing practices and marine conservation. He grew up with the sea. I ask him what he thinks of Giglio's catastrophe. How can you spend your holidays amongst nature on a ship with 4,000 other people, he asks me, with shops and swimming pools? Just think of the chlorine in that water, he says. Chlorine can be very damaging because it's corrosive. Fanciulli takes groups of tourists out on his fishing boat. He shows them the local area and educates them about environmental protection. He calls it pesca turismo. Fanciulli tells me Giglio has been overrun by tourists, something he's always dreaded. He advocates conservation and has seen how difficult it is to get people involved in environmental protection. When there's a disaster, he says, crowds of people flock to the site to take a look. But when he talks about an environmental catastrophe in the sea, no one listens. On our way back, Paolo points out the Costa Concordia's lifeboats lined up next to the bay. On the night of the disaster, they were launched too late to save all of the passengers. Back on Giglio, the locals are looking forward to a special commemorative concert in the local church by Italian violinist Uto Ughi. It's a tribute to the residents who offered shelter to thousands of survivors on that fateful night. And it's also a concert being held in memory of those who lost their lives. Many people have come early to get a seat inside. Before long, the church is packed. The salvage operation will be a long and treacherous undertaking with an uncertain outcome. But there's no doubt that the island of Giglio will continue to attract thousands of tourists, some of them seeking to witness the aftermath of a disaster.